Hello, everybody. This is Andrew from Underage Thinking, and I'd like to talk about, I think, what is one of the biggest hang-ups that a lot of Republicans have about Ron Paul, and that is his foreign policy. And specifically, within that foreign policy, this whole crazy thing about him supposedly blaming America for 9/11. That's something that a lot of his opponents and a lot of conservative people who don't like Ron Paul have brought up, saying, "Oh, there's no way he could ever win. That's not what most Americans think." And I think that's just a lie, because I don't think Ron Paul does anything of the sort. And he doesn't blame the United States for 9/11. What he does do, however, unlike any other candidate on either side of the aisle, is recognize what motivated the people who were actually to blame for 9/11. And how the United States' overly aggressive foreign policy contributed to those people's motivations. And I think that's a reality that is well documented in official Pentagon files and is very vastly different from actually blaming the attacks on the United States government itself. So to illustrate that, I've come up with an analogy that I think it applies here. So let's say Sam, right, is just some guy. He's at a bar. He's at a bar in this sleazy part of town, very violent, not a nice part of town. And he sees a guy who's clearly drunk, screaming at his girlfriend, screaming obscenities at her, and even shoving her. Like he's getting pretty violent. And so naturally, being a nice guy that he is, Sam is concerned. And so he steps in and grabs the guy and holds him off of her, and tries to break up the fight, tries to stop him from being so abrasive. Naturally, that guy, being drunk and angry, doesn't like that, and he shoves Sam to the ground. And pretty soon they get in a bar fight. And in the process of that fight, Sam really knocks a good one on this guy. He lands one right in the face, and he breaks the guy's nose, let's say. So then eventually they're pulled apart. So Sam leaves that bar that night, feeling pretty good about himself. He might have caught a glancing blow here or there, but all in all, he's proud that he stood up to help protect this innocent girl, this helpless girl, from her jerk boyfriend. So a month goes by, and Sam has long forgotten about this altercation, and then the brother of the man who he fought drives up to Sam's house with a shotgun and kills his sister in broad daylight. Right? There's dozens of witnesses. And eventually, that man is, because of all those witnesses, he's sentenced to death for his crimes. So, after the funeral, and after the trial and all that stuff, Sam's nephew, Ronnie, takes him aside and says, "Listen, Uncle Sam, it's probably, not a good idea to go back to that bar and pick a fight with somebody. I know you meant well, but it's a violent part of town, and the last thing we need is more enemies trying to kill us. I don't know if poor old grandma could take losing another one." Right? Cut. End of my folksy interpretation. End of the analogy. All right, let's examine that. In that example, did Ronnie blame Sam for what happened to his sister? Did he say that it's his fault that his sister is dead? No. Obviously not. That would be ridiculous. It's obviously the fault of the murderer who drove up on his lawn with a shotgun and killed his sister. In fact, Ronnie didn't even say necessarily that Sam did anything wrong. Or it could be argued that what Sam did was perfectly justified in that bar, trying to protect that girl. But what Ronnie was saying was simply that it would have probably worked out better for the family in the end had he never gotten involved with that guy in the first place. So in the future, it's probably not a good idea to go down into that nasty part of town again, to ensure that you don't get caught up with the wrong crowd. So for anybody who hasn't been able to pick it up pick up on it by now. In that analogy, Ronnie is Ron Paul, and his Uncle Sam, get it, is the United States government. The bar is the Middle East, the murderer is a terrorist, and Sam's sister represents the 9/11 victims. So what Ron Paul says about 9/11 is not that we caused it, not that it was an inside job, not that it's the U.S.'s fault, not that we are to blame for those deaths. He does not blame the United States for 9/11. Rather, he's simply observing that our actions in the past of bombing that region and conducting military operations that did kill people in that region, whether you think those were justified or unjustified, those actions were what motivated the murderers who drove the plane into the towers, the murderers who actually are to blame for it. And so he argues that we should limit our use of violence in the future so as not to create even more people who might want to do the same thing. So the purpose of this video is not to say that Ron Paul's foreign policy is good or bad, that is a bad idea or a good idea or whatever. And there's good arguments on both sides. I'm just trying to clarify what specifically his policy is and what his stance is on 9/11. And for all of Ron Paul's opponents who like to say, oh, Ron Paul blames America for 9/11, Rush Limbaugh said it just this past week on his radio show, and it's very common for people to say that's simply not true. Most of them, in fact, know that it's not true. They recognize that that's a lie, but they say it anyway because it's a convenient lie, and it's unfortunately an effective lie because it does turn a lot of people away from Ron Paul's policies. So if you're somebody who has maybe kind of liked something that Ron Paul has said in the past or considered supporting him, but has always kind of balked at his foreign policy or been hesitant to embrace him because of it, hopefully at least this video gave you, let you know that he's not the crazy anti-American terrorist-loving lunatic that a lot of people like to make him out to be. Thank you.